Hey, Haunty, Jerry here, and thanks for checking out this video where I'm going to be taking a look at the slate of horror films that are set to be released theatrically in 2026. And 2025, this past year, really set a pretty high standard for the horror genre with movies like Sinners and Final Destination Bloodlines, and of course, Weapons from a couple of months ago. We just recently had Predator Badlands actually become quite the success story. Black Phone 2. So we had some real highlights this year, but we also had a few lowlights thrown in there. And, will 2026 live up to the standard that 2025 set? Well, we will see, of course, next year as these movies start to roll out, but I definitely have my own opinions on that. I'm going to be taking a look at about 30 movies here, so I know that your time is valuable, so I do want to get into the list. But before I do get going, I would like to ask that if you would like to show your love and support for our channel here and help by giving a one-time donation, I will be putting our Venmo and Cash App information in the description as well as in the pinned comment. And if I remember, and I should, I'll also have it right here on the screen for you throughout this video. We really do appreciate all of your love. First of all, the source material, where I sourced all this information, I went to the website The Numbers, had a really good list of releases that are set to be released by the major studios in 2026. And then I cross-referenced with Box Office Mojo as well. Now, I'll only be including the wide theatrical releases, and for the most part, no streaming movies. Now, I say for the most part because I can't guarantee you there won't be a streaming movie in here. Of course, releases could always change from theatrical to streaming as well. But for the most part, these should all be wide theatrical releases. And of course, all release dates are subject to change. I never actually believe a movie's going to be released until its actual release date. We've seen some postponements in the past. Some of these might get postponed. Some of these might even get pulled from the schedule. Some are more likely to have that happen to than others. And I might even point those out along the way, or I should be pointing those out along the way here as well. And also keep in mind, every year brings surprises. At the beginning of this year, I don't even know if anybody even knew that Weapons was going to be released. And I know nobody was talking about it becoming the mammoth success that it ended up becoming. All right, let's begin in January. On January 2nd, which is typically that first weekend of any year, basically, is one of the slowest, if not the slowest, box office grossing weekend of the year. But in 26, on January 2nd, we do have a couple of horror films being released that day, and I'm really excited for both of them. I think the biggest of the two releases is going to be We Bury the Dead, which is a zombie thriller survival movie starring Daisy Ridley. It had its world premiere in March of this year at South by Southwest. Received a pretty positive critical reaction as well. We Bury the Dead is about a desperate woman who is searching for her husband in the aftermath of a catastrophic military experiment, and hoping to find him alive, she joins a body retrieval unit, but her search takes a chilling turn when the corpses that she's burying start showing signs of life. I think this movie has a really fun trailer. I'm really excited to see it. I don't know if it's going to be a huge box office success, but I definitely think that it's a movie that horror film fans are really going to be rather fond of, especially if this positive critical reaction plays out into the audiences. So be on the lookout for this one on January 2nd. We Bury the Dead, which is also getting released the same day as The Plague, an IFC movie, expands wide. Now, The Plague is actually opening on Christmas Eve this year, but only in limited theaters, only in a few theaters. So on January 2nd, The Plague is actually going to go wide. And The Plague is a psychological thriller that has been written and directed by Charlie Pollinger, and it also premiered at Cannes and received an 11-minute standing ovation. Now, clearly, I'm not saying that that's the end-all, be-all of a success, because The Smashing Machine with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, I remember, received quite a standing ovation when it premiered at film festivals as well earlier this year. Then when it got released, the movie just kind of sat in theaters with empty auditoriums and nobody cared. But The Plague did receive an 11-minute standing ovation, which is pretty decent, of course, for any horror film. And The Plague also played at Fantastic Fest. The Plague is about a socially anxious 12-year-old boy that is pulled into a cruel tradition at an all-boys water polo camp. The trailer says and claims that this movie is a mixture of body horror and kind of meets Lord of the Flies. It really does sound like a very interesting story. It looks a little bit dark. And I think it's going to be a perfect way to start the new year. So perhaps even doing a double feature of We Bury the Dead with The Plague. I don't see either of these movies becoming huge box office successes, but I do see them both having potential entertainment value and becoming, maybe cult favorites even within our horror film community. All right, moving ahead a week into January 9th. And the first movie that I honestly think has sleeper potential of 2026, and that is Paramount Pictures' Primate, which the trailer has already hit and I think is actually doing quite well. Primate is a natural horror film that has been co-written and directed by Johan Roberts. It also premiered at Fantastic Fest. And the movie is about a family who takes their pet chimpanzee on vacation with them. The pet chimpanzee gets bitten and has rabies and goes after the family. And so it's basically like a monkey version of Cujo is kind of how I look at it. But this movie, when it premiered, did receive positive response from critics, a very positive response from critics. And I think that that really does really fare well for the movie heading into this week. I think, like I said, Primate very well could become a sleeper and become the first moderate hit of 2026. Now, a movie that I will be honestly surprised to see it released is set to be also released on January 9th along with Primate, and that is the movie called Soulmate, which is a spin-off and third entry in the Megan franchise. Now, Soulmate was announced back when Megan 2.0 was announced earlier this year as being released. And we were told that Soulmate was, in fact, going to be a spin-off of this franchise. Well, I know at the time, Universal thought Megan 2.0 was going to become a huge summer blockbuster. That did not happen. And I immediately thought when that happened, when I saw the box office performance or lack of box office performance for Megan 2.0, I really thought at that point that Soulmate was going to end up being pulled from the release schedule or just put straight to streaming. Well, as of now, Soulmate still has a January 9th release date. As far as I know, it still has not been pulled from release. It would not surprise me, however, if it does. This is another AI goes awry movie. But here's the thing. It is the only movie that I'm going to be talking about that is set to be released in January or February that doesn't even have a teaser trailer yet. This is the time when all those January releases should have trailers. And I know there were a buttload of trailers released from the early 2026 movies this past week or two. Soulmate was not one of those trailers. So this is a movie I really do believe is a wait and see type movie. I would not be surprised if this movie does eventually get pulled from the release slate and put on streaming directly or just pulled all together. Now, a week later on January 16th is a movie that I am pretty much 100% sure is going to get released, and that is 28 Years Later, The Bone Temple, which is the follow-up to 28 Years Later, which was released in June or July. Now, I think that this one is going to be one of the bigger money makers in January, especially if it does the business that its predecessor did. Back in June, 28 Years Later opened up with $30 million its opening weekend before going on to take in domestically 70 million, but doing a global total of 150 million, pretty much breaking even, as the reported production budget on 28 Years Later was right around 75 million. So it may have even taken a little bit of a loss. Now, those numbers were fairly decent and would have been decent if the production budget wasn't so high and if it wasn't a summer release. I thought this was kind of a lackluster, sort of disappointing box office gross given the budget and given the release date. However, if the Bone Temple can turn in these kind of numbers in January, and hopefully if that budget is the same or even a little bit lower, this could actually be a pretty sizable hit for Sony and a really decent way to start off 2026. Okay, another movie that's set to be released on January 16th is a movie called Night Patrol, which is from RLJE Studios. It's a horror thriller written and directed by Ryan Prowse and starring Justin Long. And this one is about a bunch of cops rogue cops actually, who work the night patrol of their city's police department. It kind of looks, the trailer sort of reminds me of a horror film version of Training Day. And in fact, in the trailer, you can't really tell until you get about halfway through the trailer that it's even a horror film to begin with. But it has a really cool teaser poster, and I found the trailer to be quite intriguing. So I'm really looking forward to it. I don't know if it's going to set the box office on fire. It probably won't, especially with Bone Temple being released the same day. But be on the lookout for Night Patrol. It looks like a fun and entertaining watch, and who doesn't love Justin Long? Then on January 23rd, we have what I think could be our first real big box office victim of 2026, even though I actually honestly do want to see it. And that is the Cineverse Bloody Disgusting movie, Return to Silent Hill. It is the third in the Silent Hill franchise, the last one appearing in 2012, so 13 years ago. That was Silent Hill Revelation, which back then opened with $8 million on its open weekend, and then domestically ended up taking in 17.5 million, globally only 55 million. And I say only 55 million because that 55 million is only about half of what the original grossed. So the original Silent Hill was really the only one that could have been called a success. Unfortunately, even though Cineverse and Bloody Disgusting are involved, and I'm hoping beyond all hope that this is the Silent Hill that breaks through, I really think that Return to Silent Hill will probably stand the fate that Silent Hill Revelation did. Hopefully not, but my instincts are that this movie is just not going to do all that well. Okay, on January 30th is a movie that I am really super geeked about. That is going to be Sam Raimi's return to the horror comedy genre with the movie Send Help, which is a horror comedy, and it stars Rachel McAdams and Dylan O'Brien. This movie looks like it's kind of that Office politics gone bad type movie, but it's definitely a horror film, sort of castaway type plot going on. The trailer looks like a lot of fun. I'm excited to see this. I actually love Rachel McAdams. I loved her in Red Eye, one of my favorite Wes Craven movies. And so I'm really excited to see Sam Raimi's return to this genre. I think the last time, and I may be wrong in this because I haven't IMDb'd this, but the last one in my memory was Drag Me to Hell, which was another really fun journey. So that's what I'm kind of expecting from Send Help. I kind of get the vibes from the trailer, kind of like I did with Companion from this January 2025 release, one of my favorite movies of 2025. But I was really excited to see that back when I saw the trailer in late 2024. That's kind of the reaction that I had when I saw the trailer for Send Help. So I actually do have quite a high expectation that this movie is going to deliver the goods. All right, moving on to February 6th, and a movie that I'm really, really excited to see. I know I've been saying that a lot here, but this is the movie Cold Storage by Studio Canal. It's a horror comedy written and produced by David Koepp, one of our most prolific screenwriters working today. This man's written everything from Jurassic Park to Indiana Jones and everything in between. He's written blockbuster after blockbuster. And Cold Storage definitely, I believe, has sleeper potential just because he's attached to the project. Now, Cold Storage is about two employees at a self storage company who have the wildest shift of their lives when a parasitic fungus that was sealed by the government escapes. I think this movie is going to be a lot of fun. I like this February 6th release date. I think that definitely lends it some sleeper potential. Plus, you have Liam Neeson starring in this movie, and the guy has delivered hits. Let's face it, even Naked Gun did okay and was actually really well received by critics, kind of surprisingly so. So never count out Liam Neeson. David Koepp, like I said, he has written so many blockbusters. I don't think Cold Storage will be another blockbuster, but I think it, like I said, definitely could become a sleeper. Now, moving on to the end of February and the last weekend of February, that would be February 27th, and the release of Scream 7 finally being released after all the drama behind the scenes trying to get this movie filmed in the first place, going through one cast and then getting rid of the stars of that cast and bringing in again Neve Campbell, who is also being joined by Courtney Cox again as Gale Weathers. Scream 7 looks like a lot of fun. I do think this is a potential hit. I do not count out any of these movies. This franchise seems to have a built-in fan base, a dedicated fan base. I happen to be one of those people in that fan base that will see every Scream movie. So yes, I do believe this is a potential hit. I like the direction that the trailer seems to be going in, almost giving us a new Scream Queen. I don't know. I'm kind of predicting that this will be Neve Campbell's last Scream movie. Her daughter is a main character in this movie. It almost looks like they're kind of trying to prime her to become the future Scream Queen in the Scream franchise. But Scream 7, I definitely think has some hit potential to it. Now, a movie coming out on March 6th that I am not as confident in as far as a box office success goes is The Bride from Warner Brothers, which is starring Jessie Buckley and Christian Bale. Of course, Jessie Buckley is the front runner for Best Actress this year for her work in Hamnet. Christian Bale, tremendous actor. The Bride is being directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal and is a musical horror film remake of The Bride of Frankenstein, which of course has received a couple of remake treatments. The last one that I'm aware of is from the 80s, The Bride with Sting and Jessica Biel. But like I said, this one is a musical. Yes, it's a horror film, but it is still a musical. So that does leave me skeptical because while I enjoy the mashup of those two genres, I noticed that as far as an audience goes, a movie going audience that pays for the movie tickets, they don't really attend these kind of musicals. So we'll see on March 6th. Now, the other thing that kind of gives me a little caution to this movie is that it has already been postponed. It was supposed to be released in October, I think possibly the same day as Black Phone 2, if my memory serves, and then it was pulled and delayed. I think Maggie Gyllenhaal is a tremendous director. I'm really looking forward to this movie. Let me know what you think about it, by the way, in the comments, as well as any of these movies. If you think I'm off about something, or what ones excite you the most, what ones are you the most worried about, let me know all that in the comments. But that is The Bride on March 6th. Then a week later, on March 13th, we have a movie called The Undertone. Now, I don't know if this is going to be a sleeper. I don't know if this is going to make any money at all, but it definitely does pique my interest a little bit. It's a Canadian horror film that's going to be distributed by A24. And I really respect the movies that A24 as a studio. I really do respect them. The movies that they put out are really high quality, of course, independent movies. I love Canadian horror films, by the way, so the undertone kind of piques my interest for that. And there's also kind of, for lack of a better term, a really kind of cool gimmick in this movie where only the main character is ever going to be shown on screen. So all other characters, either you only hear their voices or they appear off screen somehow. And so I think it's a real cool concept and I'm really looking forward to it. Other than that, I do know it's a paranormal, supernatural movie, which, those are a couple of my favorite subgenres as well. So that is The Undertone on March 13th from A24. Then moving into March 27th, we have a movie called They Will Kill You. Once again, I don't know exactly how much, do I have a projection? I would assume that this one may underperform a little bit, but it sounds incredibly fun. And it stars Patricia Arquette, one of our favorite Scream queens, of course, from Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Warriors. She was so amazing as Kristen, and here she is returning to horror in They Will Kill You, which is about a woman who answers a help wanted ad to be a housekeeper in a mysterious high rise in New York City, not realizing that she is entering a community that has seen a number of disappearances over the years and may be under the grip of a satanic cult. Just the synopsis sounds like a lot of fun, guys. All right, then on April 10th, a sequel that I am really looking forward to, and that is Ready or Not, Here I Come, which is a sequel to the 2019 movie Ready or Not, which did okay when it premiered at the theaters. It grossed $8 million its opening weekend, grossed $30 million domestically, and $58 million globally. I will be honest with you, though, I really do believe that Ready or Not, Here I Come has the chance and very well could make more money and be a bigger hit than the first movie, because Ready or Not was not a huge hit until it went to streaming. That's where it found its second life. That's where it was discovered largely. I know that's where I discovered it even. I don't even remember the movie actually being released theatrically, but I caught it on streaming, became instantly one of my favorite horror films of all time. Samara Weaving, one of my favorite Scream queens of all time, instantly with that movie. She is returning for Here I Come, along with Catherine Newton, Sarah Michelle Gellar, Elijah Wood, a pretty stacked cast. It has a really decent April 10th release date. So yes, I do believe Here I Come can actually make a great deal of money, and that is going to come out on April 10th. Then a week later, we have on April 17th, Lee Cronin's The Mummy, the next movie in the Mummy universe or the Mummy franchise. And here's to hoping it's better than the Tom Cruise Mummy, which was the last one we had. But this Mummy by Lee Cronin is a Blumhouse Atomic Monster production, which makes this the first film in the Mummy franchise not to be produced by Universal Pictures since the early 70s, which back then Hammer Films owned the franchise. So Blumhouse and Atomic Monster, Lee Cronin is the director. If you're not familiar with his name, he is the director of Evil Dead Rise. Great movie. I'm really looking forward to this movie. I definitely think that this movie has the potential that perhaps Tom Cruise's Mummy kind of pissed away. I hope they go for more of a horror film bent, and I am thinking that's exactly what they're going to do. I have a lot of faith that Lee Cronin, who really showed his chops with Evil Dead Rise, showed what he was capable of. I think he's going to have a lot of fun here. And given that April 17th release date, it would not surprise me if Lee Cronin's The Mummy becomes a pretty sizable success. Okay, moving into May and May 1st, and a movie that I'm equal parts excited and cautious about, and that is the movie Deep Water, which is being written and directed by Renny Harlin and starring Aaron Eckhart and Ben Kingsley. So a really decent cast, at least, and a really good director. a director who's directed a couple of my favorite movies like Die Hard 2 and Cliffhanger. But this is the director that also last brought us The Strangers Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. And The Strangers Chapter 2 right now is in the running for being my worst movie, my least favorite movie of 2025, because Deepwater is about a group of international passengers en route from Los Angeles to Shanghai. They're forced to make an emergency landing in shark-infested waters, and they must work together in hopes to overcome the frenzy of sharks that are being drawn to their wreckage. I think this movie sounds like it could be a lot of fun. You know, it's probably going to be a special effects bonanza. May 1st is a pretty serious release date. You know, that's a pretty rock solid release date. So if this date holds up, it tells me that the studio at least has some faith in it. But here's one other reason to be worried. It is possible that there is going to be another horror film released on the same date. Because also on May 1st, according to the Numbers website, there is an untitled neon horror film that is also set to be released on May 1st. We have zero information on this or if it's even going to happen. But as of now, Neon does have a movie that is slated to open alongside Deepwater. That may not even happen, like I said. Deepwater, I'm hoping, on the other hand, does prove to be a fantastic movie and just a lot of fun. That's kind of what I would be expecting of a Renny Harlin directed disaster horror film. All right, then we're going to move into June on probably what will be the busiest weekend of the year next year. And that is because on June 12th, we have an untitled event film coming out by Steven Spielberg, the master himself. This has been confirmed filming. We know it's been filmed. It's probably in post-production as we speak. We don't really know a lot about this movie. We don't know a title yet or anything. All we know is that he is heading back into the UFO alien subgenre, going back to his roots. I know Santo is so excited to see this movie. It's probably his most anticipated movie of 2026. It's definitely one of my most anticipated movies of 2026. This one is being written by David Koepp, the same one who is writing or has written Cold Storage from the February 6th release. He's also written the new movie for Steven Spielberg. So that's why I told you about his street cred. The guy is amazing. He's an amazing writer. This movie stars Emily Blunt, Josh O'Connor, Colin Firth, Colman Domingo, and Wyatt Russell. So an all-star cast. I think this movie has the potential to make globally $1 billion to $2 billion. Domestically, I could definitely see this becoming that $500 to $750 million grosser. I haven't included in this list because since it is going to be a UFO alien movie, I'm assuming, as most alien movies have horror elements to them, even Close Encounters did in some respect. That's why I've included it in this list as well. But I think this movie is just going to be off the chains, kind of busy. Now, also being released on June 12th is a movie that is kind of a wait and see. We'll see if this actually does get released alongside the Steven Spielberg UFO alien movie. But right now, Scary Movie 6 is also set to be released on June 12th, which is being written by Sean Marlin and Keenan Ivory Wayans. And this marks their return to the franchise for the first time in 18 years. So they've been gone away from the Scary Movie franchise, even though the movies just kept being churned out. They've been gone for 18 years. They are returning. This one is going to star Anna Faris and Regina Hall. I'm sure this one's going to be a lot of fun. I think this one has a lot of potential because there have been, especially in the past few years, a lot of horror films out there have been released and a lot of parodying that can be done. But Scary Movie 6 definitely has the potential to make some money. I would almost expect it to move from the June 12th release. But if not, maybe it's because the studio's looking at it as being like a counter programming kind of thing. But I do believe that this movie, when it does get released, is it could actually make some dough. All right, now we're going to move into July, July 24th, actually, where we're going to see the release of Evil Dead Burn, the next movie in the Evil Dead franchise. This one's being directed by Sebastian Vanacek. And from what I've heard, this is a standalone sequel. It doesn't really build off Evil Dead Rise or the 2013 Evil Dead. But it is going to be a standalone movie. Now, keep in mind that Evil Dead Rise, when it came out, and I believe that was a spring release, grossed $67.2 million domestically, $147 million globally. So I think that Evil Dead Burn could do around the same numbers. Of course, that July 24th release, I would expect something a little bit closer, even to 80, 90 million domestically, I think would be considered really a success for July. Okay, on August 14th is a movie that I am really super geeked about. I haven't really heard anybody talk about. I don't think I've heard anybody talking about it. That is the movie called Flower Vale Street. It's a sci-fi film that's being written, produced, and directed by David Robert Mitchell, who is also the director of It Follows, one of my favorite horror films of all time. I think it's such an original movie, and I'm really excited to see what Flower Vale Street is all about, because the synopsis on this is really intriguing. It follows a family who starts to notice unusual happenings in their neighborhood. That is all I know. That is all I need to know. I think David Robert Mitchell, he has a way of doing this kind of suburban horror film, and I think Flower Vale Street is probably going to be along those lines. I'm really excited to see this. It's one of those directors that you just kind of get excited about when you hear he's doing a new movie. And so that's Flower Vale Street, written, produced, directed by David Robert Mitchell on August 14th. Then a week later, on August 21st, we are supposed to get the new Insidious movie. Now, according to the website, The Numbers, they have this titled as Insidious Red Tail. However, according to Box Office Mojo, they claim there still is not a title for this movie. I do tend to agree with Box Office Mojo on this one, because the last movie was called Red Door. So Red Tail sounds a little bit too close to that title. Doesn't seem like a very workable title to me. But speaking of Red Door, when that came out, this one grossed 82 million domestically, 189 million globally. Not the highest grossing Insidious movie, but also not the best reviewed Insidious movie. But if the new Insidious movie comes out, it does get decent reviews and the audience does get excited about it. And from what I've been hearing, they're going in a different direction. So maybe a new story, breathing some fresh energy into the franchise. And if that happens, I could see this movie easily making over 100 million domestically, especially given its August release. And you know that August releases tend to be a little bit on the slower side. That tends to be kind of the dumping ground for studios. One of the months that studios kind of dump movies into theaters, just hoping that something catches. Well, the new Insidious movie in that August 21st slot very well could have that money-making potential. Now we're going to move on to September. It's September 11th, and a movie called Clayface, which is a body horror film that is based on the character from DC Comics. So immediately I'm thinking of a dark superhero movie in line with Brightburn or The New Mutants. Now I know that audiences have been kind of divided on this horror superhero movie mashup, but I think Clayface definitely has some potential. But this is going to be the third movie in the DC universe following Superman, which came out this year and was a pretty sizable hit, and Supergirl, which is set to be released in June, hopefully becoming a big hit. Because if Supergirl makes money, I think that really does improve the chances that Clayface could be successful. But outside of that, there are reasons to be excited for this movie, even though it is given a pretty what's normally lackluster September 11th release. That early September slot does tend to be a little bit on the slower side, but Clayface is being directed by James Watkins, who last directed the remake of Speak No Evil. Mike Flanagan and Hossein Abedi wrote the screenplay, so Mike Flanagan's attached to this movie. So yeah, I think there is a great potential that Clayface very well may end up surprising a lot of people when it gets released on September 11th. Then a week later, on September 18th, we have Resident Evil. Yes, the reboot of the entire franchise. And I am so super excited to see this movie. And there is only one reason why. This one is being directed by Zach Krieger, the director of Weapons and Barbarian. This is his third movie. He is rebooting the entire Resident Evil series. And apparently, in this rebooted movie, he's going to take most of the story is going to come mostly from the first three games. So, you know what? At this point, I'm just saying, Zach, you do what you do, because Weapons was a 5-star rated movie. Barbarian got 5 stars from me. And I am really super excited to see what his vision for the Resident Evil series looks like. And we're going to find that out on September 18th. All right, that scary season, October 9th, in fact, we're going to have the movie Other Mommy coming out, which is a supernatural horror film being directed by Rob Savage, who last directed 2023's The Boogeyman. And Other Mommy is based on a 2024 novel called Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is another Blumhouse Atomic Monster production. So hopefully Blumhouse gets their shit together here in 2026, because this one actually sounds pretty bonkers and crazy, and I'm hoping this one is good. It stars Jessica Chastain, Jay Duplass, and Karen Allen. It is about a paranormal entity known as Other Mommy that threatens a young girl and starts haunting her home. This sounds like a lot of fun. Here's to hoping that it's not just one of those PG-13 Blumhouse movies that is just so bad that it's bad. Let's hope that it's actually on the higher quality side, like they've been shown that they could do. You know, Black Phone 2, great example. So let's hope that Blumhouse has a successful 2026, because they have a couple of movies that actually sound very intriguing. Other Mommy is definitely one of them, to be released on October 9th. Then we're moving on to October 16th, and a really weird sounding movie, but my kind of weird. It's the movie Whale Fall, which is a survival thriller film that's being directed by Brian Duffield, who last directed No One Will Save You. You remember that cool alien movie about, I think there was only like one character in that movie where she was haunted by aliens in her house and in this secluded house. Oh my God, what a great movie that was. Well, his follow-up to No One Will Save You is going to be Whale Fall, which is based on the novel of the same name. It stars Austin Abrams and Josh Brolin. And Whale Fall is about a scuba diver who is searching for his father's remains in the ocean when he is swallowed by a sperm whale, leaving him an hour to find a way to escape. So right there, I'm kind of thinking that the hour in movie time is going to be the hour in movie watching time. So it's going to be kind of that real time movie, which I'm a fan of. You know, I love it when you're told, hey, this bomb's going to explode in 90 minutes, and you follow all 90 minutes with the main character. That's what Whale Fall sounds like. So I really hope this movie beats its release date, because I think on October 16th, given that mid-October release date, this movie could actually do quite well. I know No One Will Save You was kind of a smaller movie. This movie seems larger in scale. So we shall see. I haven't seen, obviously, so far out, haven't seen any trailers or anything, but I'm really excited for Whale Fall when it does get released on October 16th. Then on October 23rd, we have a movie by a writer-director who I see all of his movies, no matter how disappointing they are, and that is When Remade, written, produced, and directed by M. Night Shyamalan, is set to be released. Remain is a supernatural romantic thriller, but I'm kind of classifying it as a horror film because it still is M. Night Shyamalan, and it stars Jake Gyllenhaal. This movie is about a New York architect who heads to Cape Cod to design a summer home for his best friend, seeking a fresh start after being treated for acute depression and still mourning his sister's death. He meets Red, a young woman who disrupts his carefully ordered world. This synopsis isn't all that exciting, but you know what? It's an M. Night movie. So, you know what? I see them all, from good to bad. I've seen them all. I'm going to see this one. Now, keep in mind, though, that the last three M. Night movies have pretty much grossed consistently between $40 and $50 million, so domestically, anyways. So that seems to be kind of his comfort zone. So, regardless, I think that M. Night does have a built-in fan base as well. So I do see this movie at least making around a $50 million mark. But he produces his own movies and everything, so I think he's financing his own movies at this point. But Remain, you can never count out M. Night, so we'll see. Maybe this will be the one that will take off. All right, into December, and December 4th, a sequel, one of my most anticipated sequels, and that is going to be Violent Night 2, which is once again being directed by Tommy Wirkola, who also directed the original Violent Night, and this one brings back David Harbour as Santa Claus. Violent Night is one of my favorite Christmas movies, kind of right up there with Krampus. When it came out, it did gross $50 million domestically, $76 million globally. Not a huge success, but once again, as with Ready or Not, I did notice that more people, once it hit streaming, more people were finding the movie. So it would not surprise me if Violent Night 2 actually improves on the box office of Violent Night simply by there just being more fans out there. Because it has been a couple of years now, and I think this movie is going to be a lot of fun, and it does have a really, really nice release date right after Thanksgiving, but still a couple of weeks before Christmas, giving it time to kind of generate those box office grosses. Then on December 25th, Christmas of 2026, my most anticipated horror film, and actually my most anticipated movie of the year, is set to be released, and that is the movie Werewolf, which is being co-written and directed by Robert Eggers. It's his follow-up to my 5-star, I gave it 5 stars anyways, Nosferatu. And Werewolf stars Aaron Taylor Johnson and is set in 13th century England, where a mysterious creature stalks a foggy countryside as local folklore becomes a terrifying reality for the villagers. This one it just sounds amazing. Robert Eggers moving from vampire to werewolf. The werewolf subgenre is right in my top 3 subgenres of all time. I am so geeked for this movie. I can't wait to see his take on a werewolf movie. We saw what he did with Nosferatu. He's a true master. He loves what he does. It shows in each and every film. And I am really, really excited for Werewolf when it gets released on Christmas Day, 2026. Now, there are a couple of other movies that I did not mention, other horror films, that very well may receive release dates next year. Thanksgiving 2 by Eli Roth very well could slide into a November release date. I know that we've been discussing that one quite a bit here in the horror community as being a sequel. It's going to happen. It's just a matter of when. I think 2026 is a pretty good possibility. What about Terrifier 4? We know that Damien Leone is working on that as we speak. So could that be a release coming out next year? Calendar-wise, it almost makes sense. It would be 2 years after Terrifier 3. So yes, I do believe there is a really good chance Terrifier 4 gets released. Now, I think there is a less likely of a chance, though, that we see Mike Flanagan's reboot or reimagining, whatever it ends up being, of The Exorcist, taking over for the canceled trilogy from David Gordon Green. We know Mike Flanagan is working on this movie. Will it be released in 2026? Of these three movies, Thanksgiving 2, Terrifier 4, and The Exorcist, I think Mike Flanagan's The Exorcist is the least likely to actually be released. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this video, and I thank you so much for joining me. And once again, if you enjoy this video, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel, as well as like and share this video. Also, let me know what you think of the movies that are coming out next year. Which ones are you excited for? Which ones are you going to avoid at all costs? And which ones are you just sort of meh about? Let me know that in the comments section. And if you'd like to support us as well as earning yourself a ton of rewards, we'd love to have you over on Patreon with us, where regardless of whatever tier you choose, you'll receive a 7-day free trial membership so you can try out most of the rewards anyways, absolutely risk-free. All right, well, that is going to be it for now, and I look forward to seeing you again. And until then, that's a wrap.